what if the UBI, Citizens Basic Income, has been spoken about a lot, especially in recent years. And in preparation for what we're going to do in the discussion, I'd like to just present a few ideas for discussion and look at the UBI and see what else there is out there. Because when you look at the UBI, it's really simple. It can be explained in a tweet or on the back of a postcard. So what could possibly go wrong with it? And are the assumptions that we have about the monetary system that we're using correct? And if they're not correct, what are the alternatives? What might be able to use that would be an equitable solution in these situations? So please shout if the slides aren't transitioning as I'm talking. So warning, yeah, there will be a little bit of economic speak in this, but it really is important for everyone to have a correct basic understanding of economics to be able to make informed decisions, especially when it comes to your livelihood. So there are one or two concepts I haven't got time to go into detail in this 15 minutes, but hopefully you'll be able to make notes of what it is you need more information on. We can go through that in the breakouts. So what if we had a universal basic income? Basic income guarantee, citizens' basic income, an unconditional guaranteed sum paid into your bank account monthly, freeing you to do stuff other than earn your universal credit. It can be written on a t-shirt like "Make America Great Again" or on a mug like "Strong and Stable." Now the message reinforces the simplicity, and the repetition of that message reinforces acceptance. So it's a little difficult to take a step back from it when it has become so sort of commonly accepted and say, well, actually, is there anything else that we need to know? The one thing that no one can agree on looking into this is what is adequate, what is basic, how much it should be paid at. I'd like to put forward another proposition. What about something that's not as easy to write on a mug or a t-shirt? Appropriate work whenever you need it that pays a living wage. I'm talking about a scheme that's entirely voluntary. It's permanently available to anyone that needs it, pays a living wage, and it matches work to people and people to work. I don't have time to explain now, but the one thing you don't have to worry about is funding. Anything that's centrally government funded is fully affordable. And it would be locally administered so that it finds work for people in the local area that you don't need to travel away for. And it fulfills local employment needs. And this is particularly relevant for things in terms of traditional culture that are relevant to your local area.
Malcolm, sorry to disturb. Have you put your slides up yet?
Oh no, they haven't come through.
Not yet, no.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
All we saw was you picking your nose, Malcolm.
Are you seeing anything now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I don't know. My mistake. I hope you can see that now.
Yep.
Okay. Screen mess. Beg your pardon. So yeah, an appropriate work wherever you need it that pays a living wage scheme instead of a UBI as an alternative. It would work in conjunction with a basic income. And we know that staying actively involved in doing work is actually good for your mental health and for your self-esteem. It would also relieve a lot of administrative burden for self-employed people who need to find ad hoc work. So what I want to do here is apply a bit of critical analysis to both ideas of UBI and the other scheme, let's call it a job guarantee scheme. So the questions that would come up for any solution, well, what could possibly go wrong with it? Are there any conditions that apply, any age or other factors that would be necessary to meet? What solution would be used to remove the existing welfare safety nets and benefits? Would it be used to privatize or reduce public services health care, education, and various other things? What other rights or entitlements might it affect? How is the adequate payment defined, particularly in case of the UBI? Would it be a living wage or would it be a subsistence level payment? What guarantees would any solution come with? How transparent and accessible is it going to be? What economic factors and consequences are at play here? Is there anything going on that we may not be unaware of? And it's important that whatever we come up with is not just a sticking plaster, but a solution that addresses the fundamental flaws that we've got with inequality and wealth extraction in the economy. I'd like to look at next UK wealth inequality. This is a graph that's based on Office of National Statistics data. I've simplified it so that it makes it a bit more snappy. If we had equal distribution of wealth in the whole country, nobody would have any more money than everyone else. There'd be a flat line across there. But we have poverty and we have rich people. So there's a bit of a gradient between the poor and the rich. It should, if things were being equitably distributed between poor and rich, be a straight line quite like that. But what we have in reality is a distribution curve that looks like this. It's highly inequitable. The top 1% have more wealth than the bottom 40%. You don't start seeing average wealth until you get up into the 70th percent mark, the 7th decile. So it means that 60% of the population have below average wealth, and the bottom 20 to 30% are in some form of relative poverty or negative equity. So the theory is we apply a UBI and everybody gets a little bit of money. And the promise is that it will lift up that bottom section of the curve and give everybody a little bit more money to live on. But in reality, that's not what happens. In reality, what will happen is that the distribution system that we have will take that money away. After a little while, the difference the UBI makes will be absorbed into the price and wage structure, and it will erase it. So the people at the bottom 20, 30% will still end up in relative poverty compared to everybody else. All you've done basically is just inflate the curve by a little bit equivalent to the UBI. There's plenty of money there, and it's not a money problem, it's a distribution problem. And the UBI doesn't address that. So a bit more detail behind it. It's going to be absorbed into price and wage structure. So the recipients of the UBI will not be the people who benefit from it. As demand goes up as the result of the extra money going into the economy, producers know that they can put their prices up. Are they going to increase production, increase their costs of production, or are they just going to raise prices just to maintain their profits? It's as simple as that. And it's not going to do anything to stop people asking you just to perform for the exposure. You could still be asked to do that. Also, it would be substantiated by saying, well, you're getting a UBI anyway, aren't you? You can still come and perform for the exposure. If employers want to find loopholes, they still will. The other thing's a bit more difficult to get through about the economics of it. But basically, we live in a monetary society where there's a contract between the government and the people. And the contract between the people and the government is broken. We've forgotten how the money system works. Well, we haven't forgotten, we've been misled how it works. And the UBI absolves the government of its responsibility to solve the unemployment problem and to make sure that everyone has the ability to earn its currency. Yeah. It's already part of the expectation that UBI will present an opportunity to simplify and streamline the welfare and benefits process. We can expect this to include the further privatization of basic services like health and welfare and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a Trojan horse to get rid of all the other cash benefit systems that are around. There's been many examples of UBI trials, but they've never actually been a trial of a UBI. They've all been means tested or conditional, paid to people who were already on some kind of welfare or support form. And they've always taken a section of society. So if you pay a small number of people extra money, then yeah, they're going to be relatively better off. Until you've actually paid it to the whole of the country, everyone in society, you're not really trialing a UBI, you're just trialing an improved welfare benefit system. The one thing that is needed is that a basic income in a situation that we've got at the moment where there's a collapse in production, a supply side collapse as well as a demand collapse. So who wants a UBI? Well, there are a number of politicians out there who are very interested. Slipped a slide there. So what it looks like in a diagram is this. You've got a central government here who's paying a universal basic income. And whether you're in work or out of work, that's all you get. Whether you're disabled, parenting, or caring for somebody, but whatever it is, you just get the universal basic income. Other cash benefits will be pared away. And it also threatens universal basic services with the potential of further privatization or reduction. Who wants the UBI? Well, there is a number of politicians. I don't think they fully understand it. Even Nicola Sturgeon's getting on board with it as well. It's easy enough to grasp. It sounds very progressive. But here's Andrew Yang. He was a potential candidate for the 2020 presidential election in America. And his platform was based on a UBI. I could have filled a whole slide with all the billionaires and CEOs that think it's a good idea, but the worrying thing are these three economists at the bottom. They're not progressive economists. Friedrich Hayek was Margaret Thatcher's guru. He wrote the book, The Road to Serfdom, which was her Bible. James Buchanan is basically the architect of the modern autocracy in America, where the individual has rights over the sovereignty of the state and democracy. And Milton Friedman was one of Ronald Reagan's economic advisors. So let's look at the other side of things, the job guarantee. How does that measure up in promise versus reality? Yeah, it's complex. It's not as simple as a UBI, but the whole thing depends on having jobs, and it will create jobs. At the moment, we've got a massive administration looking after unemployment. We want to turn that round and expand it and create it and turn it into a jobs creation and employment management scheme. It needs to match jobs to people and people to jobs. And it also, in this way, gives the government an avenue to realize policy. Now, there's no way that the private sector is ever going to turn around the economy and get off of fossil fuels in the time scale that we need. It must be led by the government. And we don't want to do what Thatcher did in the 80s, which was just close down an industry and make people redundant. This scheme could actually take people, put them through training, develop new industries without having to wait for the private sector to do it. And there's particularly a good avenue here for developing support for culture and heritage, particularly in traditional culture and things like that. If there's a government policy that requires something, you don't have to rely on individuals or voluntary organizations to do it. You've got a scheme here where you could direct the traditional music resources into doing that. And it would be an aid to community groups and organizations. So much in this country is done by charities and voluntary groups. One thing that always comes up is, oh, it's working for your welfare, but it's not that. It will pay a living wage. This is one thing that we can say it will do, absolutely, as opposed to the UBI, which doesn't seem to know what it'll pay. It has to pay a living wage. You will no longer have in-work poverty if people can leave a job and go and get a work under this scheme, which will pay them a living wage with benefits. it mustn't compete with the private sector. You can't set up a job guarantee scheme which actually takes jobs away from people who already have work in that area. So it's got to be careful not to do that. It's available all the time. You can walk out of a job into the job guarantee scheme anytime you like. In that way, it doesn't act in a pro-cyclical way, which a UBI would, where people are being paid money regardless of what state the economy is in. But if there's a collapse, a recession of some sort, then it won't be inflationary in the way that a UBI might. And as I've said, that in a COVID situation, we need it, and it has got a couple of advantages. First of all, people who find themselves unemployed would be able to move into the job guarantee scheme, and it also provides a framework for the basic income. And you can trial a job guarantee. What that looks like in a diagram, you've got central government funding, but local administration of the scheme. You have two options, a basic income or a job guarantee. The job guarantee pays slightly more because we want to encourage people into work. The basic income would pay slightly less, and you're not allowed to work while you're on the basic income. How it works for people in parenting and caring is open for discussion. Underneath that, we would still have certain cash benefits, perhaps for additional disability, but things like unemployment would definitely disappear. Other things could change as well. We wouldn't need child and housing allowance if we've got a job guarantee that pays a living wage. Universal basic services must remain because that's fundamental to what the government's here to provide. Enterprise startups to ensure people don't compete with the private sector. And the kind of jobs that you're looking at, arts, environment, culture and heritage are prime there. Everything in that little box is stuff that is handled by charitable and voluntary organizations. It's the sort of thing that you won't get private sector creating jobs in because it's just not profitable for them. But there is so much there. And if you've got government policies that want to put resources into these things, then you've got a way of doing that through the job guarantee. So who wants a job guarantee? Politicians you might recognize. I'm not too sure where Lorna Slater is really on this because she seems to be pro UBI and then talks job guarantee, but she's been recently talking UBI again. I couldn't find any CEOs or billionaires who support it, surprisingly. And there are some economists out there, progressives, who understand it and are promoting it. Particularly watch out for the two ladies there at the bottom, Stephanie Kelton and Pavlina Chernova. Stephanie Kelton's book's been released this year, The Deficit Myth. I wish that had been around 5 years ago when I started looking into this. And Pavlina Chernova has written a job guarantee book. There are loads of books on UBI, but this is the only one I've ever come across on the job guarantee. So, items for the discussion. We need to think about the strategic remit to support and promote intangible cultural heritage. How we can take people like yourselves who've got the skills into different areas of work that need doing, and to provide you with the opportunities for performance, research, whatever it is that you're interested in doing. It will retain a working pool of experienced musicians. So we need to look at the different ways that you can develop policies that you can put forward. And what I would like to see is the development of a vision around which you can focus this, and then a mission statement as to what policies and strategy you would need to put in place to bring that vision into a reality. And you've got a brilliant forum in the Traditional Music Forum to take this forward as a lobbying group once you've developed your vision and your mission statement. Okay, that's me.